Adeline Cross tore the diamond off her finger and hurled it into the dark into a cornfield she couldn't name in a town she'd never heard of. Then she dropped to her knees in the mud beside a stranger's broken porch, looked up at a bankrupt Navy veteran holding a screaming infant, and said the 7 words that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "I'm not fit for any man anymore." A billionaire, on her knees, in the rain, begging a man who couldn't pay his own light bill to let her vanish. But the secret buried under that ruined coat would flip his whole world upside down before sunrise. Here's the twist. Nobody sees coming. The very thing that made her run was about to become the only thing that could save his children. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you believe a good man raising his kids alone deserves a second chance, hit that subscribe button and stay till the end. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this one finishes. At 3 o'clock in the morning, Wyatt Coleman stood in his own kitchen holding a piece of paper that felt heavier than any weapon he'd ever carried in the Navy. Notice of foreclosure. He read it again like the words might rearrange themselves into something merciful. They didn't. 90 days. That was all the bank was giving him. 90 days to come up with money. He didn't have money he'd never have before they took the only piece of ground his family had ever owned. From the back bedroom, the baby started to cry. Wyatt closed his eyes. "Not yet, buddy," he whispered. "Just give Daddy 1 minute. 1 minute." Eli didn't care about minutes. Eli was 7 months old and hungry and alone in a crib, and the crying climbed higher and sharper until it filled the whole house. Wyatt set the notice down on the counter face down, like that could hide it, and moved toward the back of the house on legs that hadn't slept in 2 days. He passed the little bedroom where his daughter slept, and he slowed. Sadie was 6 years old. She was curled up under a blanket that used to be her mother's, and even in sleep, her small hands were fisted tight, her eyebrows pulled together like she was bracing for something. A 6-year-old shouldn't sleep like she's expecting a hit. Wyatt had noticed that months ago, and it had put a crack in him that never healed. He kept moving. He scooped Eli out of the crib, and the crying dropped instantly to hiccups. "There he is," Wyatt murmured. "There's my boy. I got you. I always got you." He carried the baby to the kitchen, propped him against his shoulder, and reached for the formula with one hand. The can was almost empty. He measured out what was left and prayed it would be enough to get to morning because there was $11 in his wallet and a truck outside that ran on faith and fumes. His hands were shaking. He hated that. A man who'd stood on the deck of a destroyer in 20-foot swells and never flinched, and now his hands shook trying to make a bottle for his son. "Easy," he told himself. "Easy, sailor." That was when the headlights hit the window. Wyatt froze. Nobody came out this far. His farm sat at the dead end of a gravel road, 3 miles from the nearest neighbor, and the only visitors he ever got anymore drove county cars and carried clipboards and questions about whether a man like him could really do this alone. He looked out. A black SUV, the kind that cost more than his house had ever been worth, rolled up his broken driveway and stopped, hard tires spitting gravel. The engine cut. The door opened. A woman stepped out into the rain. She didn't belong here. Wyatt knew it in one look. She wore a coat that probably cost more than his truck heels, sinking into the mud hair plastered to a face that, even soaked and exhausted, looked like it had been photographed for magazines. She was beautiful in a way that made you want to look away, because beauty like that came from a different world, and men like Wyatt Coleman had learned to stay in their own. She walked toward the porch like she wasn't sure her legs would hold. Wyatt shifted the baby to one arm and opened the door before she could knock. "Ma'am," he said, "you're a long way from wherever you're supposed to be." She stopped at the bottom of the steps. Rain ran down her face. For a second, she just stared at him, at the man in the doorway, with a bottle in one hand and a baby in the other, and dark circles under his eyes. "I need a place to disappear," she said. Wyatt blinked. "You need what? A place to disappear." Her voice was steady, but there was something under it, something wound so tight it might snap. "1 night, that's all. I'll pay you, whatever you want. Lady, I don't know who you are, and I don't know what kind of trouble you brought up my driveway, but it's 3 in the morning, and I got 2 kids in this house. Please." The word came out cracked, and then softer almost to herself. "I don't have anywhere else. I've been driving for 11 hours. I don't even know what state I'm in." Wyatt studied her. 20 years the Navy had taught him to read people fast, to know in a heartbeat who was dangerous and who was drowning. This woman wasn't dangerous. She was terrified. She was terrified in the specific bone-deep way of someone running from a thing much bigger than herself. "You in trouble with the law?" he asked. "No." "You running from a man?" Something flickered across her face. "Men," she said. Plural. Eli chose that moment to start fussing again. Wyatt bounced him automatically, and the woman's eyes dropped to the baby, and something in her face changed. Cracked open just for a second, like she'd forgotten what a baby looked like, or remembered something she'd lost. "He's hungry," she said. "He's always hungry." "Where's his—" She stopped herself. "Their mother's gone." Wyatt said flat because there was no gentle way to say it and no point pretending. "Been just us for a while now." The woman was quiet. The rain kept coming down. "One night," Wyatt said finally, and he could already hear his own better judgment screaming at him. "You sleep on the couch, you're gone by morning, and I don't want your money." "You don't want—" She looked at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. "Everyone wants my money. I'm not everyone," Wyatt said. "Come in before you catch your death." She climbed the steps slowly. When she passed him in the doorway, he caught the smell of expensive perfume and rain, and underneath it fear sweat, the sour animal smell of a person who's been running so long they've forgotten how to stop. "I'm Wyatt," he said, closing the door behind her. "Wyatt Coleman." She hesitated, and in that hesitation, Wyatt understood that whoever she was about to say she was, it wasn't the truth. "Adeline," she said. "Adeline what?" "Just Adeline." "All right, just Adeline." He nodded at the couch. "There's a blanket over the arm. Bathroom's down the hall. Try not to wake my daughter, she's got school pictures Thursday, and she's been up half the nights this week same as me." Adeline stood in the middle of his living room, dripping on the floor, taking in the peeling wallpaper, the water-stained ceiling, the mountain of unpaid bills stacked on the coffee table. The crib mattress leaned against the wall because the crib's leg had broken, and he hadn't had the money to fix it. She looked at all of it, and Wyatt braced for the pity. He'd gotten good at bracing for pity, but she didn't pity him. She just looked tired. "Thank you," she said. "I mean it. You don't know what you just did." "Fed a stranger my couch," Wyatt said. "Not exactly Medal of Honor material." She almost smiled. Almost. Then she sat down on the very edge of the couch, still in her wet coat hands folded in her lap like a woman at a funeral, and stared at the wall. Wyatt took the baby back to the kitchen, finished the bottle, and fed his son in the dark. And the whole time, he watched the strange woman on his couch out of the corner of his eye. She never lay down. She never took off the coat. She sat there for 2 straight hours, wide awake, flinching every time a car passed on the distant highway. And Wyatt realized she wasn't hiding from the rain. She was watching the road. Morning came gray and cold. Wyatt woke on the kitchen floor. He'd fallen asleep sitting up against the cabinets with Eli in his arms, and for one blessed second he'd forgotten everything. The foreclosure, the empty bank account, the stranger on his couch. Then he smelled bacon. He was on his feet before his brain caught up Eli still asleep against his chest, and he came around the corner into the kitchen and stopped dead. Adeline stood at his stove. She'd taken off the ruined coat. Underneath she wore a silk blouse, smudged with mud sleeves pushed up, and she was actually cooking eggs and bacon in something that smelled like coffee that didn't come from a can. "Where did you—" Wyatt started. "Your fridge was empty," she said without turning around. "So was your pantry mostly. I found flour and eggs. And I drove into town at 5. There's a little store. The man there was very confused about why I was buying groceries at that hour." "You went into town." Panic spiked in his chest before he could stop it. Panic he didn't fully understand yet. "You told me you were hiding." "I wore a hat." She flipped a piece of bacon. "I was quick." "Adeline." He set Eli down in the bouncer and crossed the kitchen. "I told you I don't want your money. That includes groceries. I can feed my own kids." She turned to face him then, and there was steel in her eyes, the kind he hadn't expected. "Can you—" The question hit like a slap. Wyatt's jaw tightened. "That's not—" There was no food in this house, Wyatt. None. Your son was drinking the last of the formula last night. Your daughter's lunchbox on the counter had a single slice of bread in it. One slice. Her voice didn't rise, and somehow that made it worse. I'm not judging you. God knows I'm the last person on earth with any right to judge anybody. But don't stand there and tell me pride is more important than those two children eating breakfast. Wyatt stared at her. Nobody had spoken to him like that in a long time. Not since his wife. And the fury that rose up in him tangled with something else, shame and relief, and a strange, dangerous gratitude, until he couldn't tell which was which. You don't know anything about me, he said quietly. No, she agreed. But I know what a drowning person looks like. I've been staring at one in the mirror for 6 months. Before Wyatt could answer, a small voice came from the hallway. Daddy. Sadie stood in the doorway in her nightgown, hair a mess, blanket dragging behind her. She looked at the stranger at the stove, and her whole little body went rigid with the wariness of a child who'd learned too early that new people usually meant bad news. Who's that? Sadie asked. Wyatt opened his mouth, but Adeline was already crouching down, lowering herself to the girl's eye level, moving slow and careful, like you would with a spooked animal. Hi, Adeline said. My name's Adeline. I got stuck in the rain last night, and your dad was kind enough to let me stay. I hope that's okay with you. It's your house, too. Sadie didn't answer. She looked at her father. It's okay, baby, Wyatt said. She's just here for breakfast, then she's gonna go. But Sadie kept staring at Adeline. And then, in the blunt way only a 6-year-old can manage, she said, You're pretty, but you look sad. The kitchen went silent. Something moved across Adeline's face, a whole storm of it. And for a second, Wyatt thought this composed, expensive, dangerous woman was going to cry right there on his kitchen floor. You know what? Adeline said, and her voice was thick. I am sad. That's very smart of you to see that. Sometimes I'm sad too, Sadie offered. But Daddy says being sad is okay as long as you don't stay there. Adeline looked up at Wyatt, and Wyatt looked away because there was something in that look he wasn't ready to be seen holding. Your dad, Adeline said softly, sounds like a smart man. Breakfast happened. It was the strangest meal Wyatt could remember him and his 2 kids, and a billionaire he didn't know was a billionaire, all crowded around a table, with one leg propped up on a phone book, eating the best food that table had held in a year. Sadie ate 3 eggs. 3. Wyatt watched his daughter eat until she was full, actually full, and had to get up and pretend to check on something in the other room so nobody would see his face. When he came back, Adeline was holding Eli. Wyatt stopped in the doorway. She had the baby against her shoulder, one hand cupped behind his tiny head, swaying without even seeming to know she was doing it. And Eli, who screamed at strangers, who'd screamed at the pastor's wife and the mailman, and Wyatt's own brother Eli, was sound asleep against her chest. He likes you, Wyatt said. Adeline looked down at the baby like he was something impossible. Babies don't usually like me, she said. I don't have a lot of practice. She stopped. I was always too busy. Busy with what? She didn't answer. And there it was again, the door slamming shut behind her eyes, the truth ducking back into the dark. Wyatt let it go. For now. She was supposed to leave by morning. Morning came and went. By noon, Adeline had fixed the crib. Wyatt didn't even know how he came in from checking the fences, the ones on the north pasture, that had been sagging for a year, because he couldn't afford wire, and found her kneeling on the bedroom floor with a screwdriver, the broken leg braced and bolted back together with a metal bracket she'd found God knew where. You know how to fix a crib, Wyatt said. I know how to read directions, she said. It's not that different from anything else. You find the broken part, you figure out why it broke, you make it hold. She stood, brushing off her knees. I'm good at that. Or I used to be. Used to be. I fixed a lot of broken things, she said. For a lot of years. And then something broke that I couldn't fix, and everyone decided that meant I couldn't fix anything at all. Her jaw tightened. But that's not your problem. You keep almost telling me who you are. Wyatt said. And then you stop. Adeline set the screwdriver down. She looked at him for a long moment, and Wyatt got the feeling she was weighing something weighing him. If I tell you, she said, you'll want me gone, and I don't have anywhere to go yet. Try me. No. She shook her head. Not yet. Give me a few days, please. I'll earn my keep. I'll cook, I'll clean, I'll watch the kids while you work. And when I'm ready, when it's safe, I'll tell you everything, and then I'll leave, and you'll never have to think about me again. She held his gaze. Just a few days, Wyatt. That's all I'm asking. Every instinct Wyatt had was screaming that this was a mistake. A stranger with secrets, a woman clearly running from powerful people in a house with his children. It was the kind of decision that got a man in trouble he couldn't afford. And he had less to lose than almost anyone alive. But what he had left was everything. And yet, he thought about Sadie eating 3 eggs. He thought about the crib that hadn't stood on 4 legs in 3 months. He thought about the 2 hours of sleep he'd gotten, while a stranger held his son the first 2 hours of real sleep he'd had since Eli was born. A few days, Wyatt said. But you tell me the second any of it comes near my kids. The second. You understand me? I understand. And you don't lie to my daughter. She's had enough people lie to her. I won't lie to Sadie, Adeline said. And there was something in the way she said the girl's name like she'd already decided to protect it. That made Wyatt believe her. The days that followed changed something in the house, and Wyatt couldn't have said exactly when it happened. It was in the small things. It was Adeline learning the exact temperature Eli liked his bottle. It was Sadie coming home from school, and for the first time in months, running into the house instead of dragging her feet at the door. It was the smell of dinner cooking when Wyatt came in from the fields, exhausted, hands cracked and bleeding, ready to face the nightly arithmetic of which bill he could afford to ignore this month, and finding instead a hot plate and a woman who asked him how his day went and actually waited for the answer. He'd forgotten what that felt like. Being asked, being answered to. You're doing too much, he told her one evening watching her fold laundry, while Sadie did homework at the table and Eli babbled in the bouncer. I like doing too much, Adeline said. For most of my life I did everything. Then I did nothing all at once and it nearly killed me. This, she gestured at the pile of tiny socks, the crayoned homework, the baby. This is the first thing that's felt real in longer than I can remember. Real, Wyatt repeated. Where I come from, nothing's real. Everything's a transaction. Everyone's calculating what you're worth to them. She matched a pair of socks, set them aside. Nobody ever gave me a couch and asked for nothing back. Do you know how strange that is? You had nothing, Wyatt. You had nothing, and you gave me a place to sleep and refused my money. I've spent 6 months surrounded by people who had everything and would have handed me to the wolves for a parking spot. The people you're running from. Her hands went still on the laundry. Adeline, Wyatt said gently, you've been here 5 days. You still flinch every time a car goes by. You made me put a bolt on the back door. Last night, I watched you check every window in the house before you'd lie down. Whatever's chasing you, it's real and it's serious, and I got 2 kids under this roof. I think it's time. Adeline sat down slowly on the arm of the couch. She looked at Sadie bent over her homework tongue, poking out in concentration. She looked at Eli, and then she looked at Wyatt, and Wyatt watched the last of her defenses come down board by board. You ever hear of Meridian Global? She asked. Wyatt frowned. The tech company, the one that's on all the... He stopped. Understanding crawled up his spine like cold water. That's a Fortune 500 company. That's one of the biggest companies in the country. In the world, Adeline said quietly. It's one of the biggest companies in the world. What's that got to do with you? Adeline took a breath. I built it. The clock on the wall ticked. Sadie's pencil scratched. Eli cooed at his own fist. You built it, Wyatt said. I started it in a garage 22 years ago with $9,000 and a piece of software nobody thought would work. Her voice was steady now, the way a person's voice gets steady when they've finally stopped running from a thing and turned to face it. I built it into a company worth $80 billion. I was the CEO for 19 years. My name is Adeline Cross, And 4 months ago, the board of directors I handpicked and the man I was going to marry sat me down in a conference room I paid for and told me I was being removed. Effective immediately. Escorted out of my own building by security I hired. Wyatt stared at her. His mouth had gone dry. You're saying you're... I'm saying that the woman sleeping on your couch has more money in accounts she can't currently touch than this entire county will see in 100 years. Adeline laughed, and there was no joy in it. And I'm saying that money didn't stop a single one of them from stabbing me in the back. But... Wyatt shook his head, trying to make it fit. But if it's your company, if you built it, how can they just... Legally they can't. Not the way they did it. Adeline's eyes went hard, and for the first time, Wyatt saw a flash of the woman who'd run an $80 billion empire the steel under the exhaustion. They manufactured a reason. They forged documents. They claimed I was mentally unfit to lead, that I'd become erratic, unstable, a danger to shareholder value. They had doctors I'd never met sign statements. They had my own fiancé testify that I'd been having episodes. Her voice cracked on the word. There were no episodes, Wyatt. There was a woman who found out her partner and her board had been quietly selling her out to a competitor for 18 months, and who made the mistake of confronting them before she had proof. So you ran. So I ran. Because the moment I threatened to expose them, people started following me. My accounts started freezing. A car I didn't recognize started sitting outside my building. And one night, a man I'd never seen got into the elevator with me and told me very politely that it would be a shame if I had an accident before the transition was complete. She met his eyes. That's when I understood. They didn't just want my company. They wanted me gone. Permanently. And nobody would question it because they'd already spent 4 months telling the whole world I was crazy. The kitchen was dead silent. Even Eli had gone quiet, as if the baby could feel the weight settle over the room. Wyatt's mind was reeling. A billionaire. An actual billionaire, sitting on the arm of his falling-apart couch, folding his children's laundry. It was insane. It didn't make any sense. And yet it made perfect, terrible sense. The fear, the checking windows, the 11-hour drive to nowhere, the way she'd said men plural. Why here? Wyatt asked. Why my farm out of everywhere you could have gone? Because nobody would ever look here, Adeline said simply. Because the last place on earth they'd expect Adeline Cross to hide is the end of a gravel road in a town with one traffic light in the home of a man who's never heard of me. She looked around the room. I've been hunted for 4 months. Private investigators. People I used to trust reporting my whereabouts. Everywhere I went, someone recognized me, and within hours the black cars showed up. Her voice softened. But nobody recognized me here. You didn't recognize me. And your daughter looked at me and saw a sad woman, not a headline. She swallowed. Do you have any idea how long it's been since someone looked at me and just saw a person? Wyatt didn't know what to say, so he said the truest thing he had. You want some coffee? Adeline stared at him, and then finally, fully, she laughed. A real laugh startled out of her, wet at the edges. You just found out I'm a fugitive billionaire being hunted by a corporate conspiracy, and you're offering me coffee? Well, Wyatt said, you're not going to solve any of it without coffee, that much I know. Sadie looked up from her homework. Daddy, can I have coffee? No, Wyatt and Adeline said at the same time. And then they looked at each other, and something passed between them, something warm and terrifying, and completely unwelcome to both of them. That night, after the kids were asleep, they sat at the kitchen table, with 2 cups of the good coffee she'd bought, and Wyatt asked the question that had been sitting in his chest for an hour. What are you going to do? Adeline wrapped both hands around her cup. I don't know. For 4 months, my whole plan was just don't die. Stay ahead of them. Stay alive long enough for... She stopped. For what? She looked at him for a long moment, weighing again. Then she reached into the inside pocket of the coat draped over the chair beside her, the ruined coat she'd never fully let out of arm's reach, and pulled out a small object. A flash drive matte black, unremarkable. She set it on the table between them. For this, she said. What is it? 18 months of evidence, emails, wire transfers, recorded calls, the forged medical documents, the offshore accounts where they were funneling the money before they sold the company out from under the shareholders. Her voice dropped. Everything. Every crime they committed in order with dates and dollar amounts. Enough to send every last one of them to federal prison and hand me my company back on a platter. Wyatt looked at the little black drive like it was a live grenade. Then why are you running? Why not just go to the FBI? The papers? Because the second I surface, I'm dead, Adeline said flatly. The only reason I'm alive right now is that they don't know where I am, and they don't know if I have proof or just suspicions. If I go public before I'm somewhere safe, before I have people I trust who can protect me, and this drive. At the same time, they'll make sure I have that accident the man in the elevator promised. And then this drive disappears, and they win, and they walk. She pushed the coffee away. I need time, Wyatt. I need to be somewhere they'll never look just long enough to make the right calls to the right people. And then I need to hit them all at once so fast and so hard that not one of them has time to run. And this place, my farm, is the first place in 4 months I've been able to close my eyes without thinking I might not open them again. She looked at him, and her composure finally fully broke. Do you understand? You gave me that. You. A man with $11 in his wallet gave me the one thing $80 billion couldn't buy. You gave me a night's sleep. Wyatt sat with that. Outside, the wind moved through the dead corn. Somewhere a coyote called. You said a few days, he said quietly. When you got here, you said a few days and then you'd be gone. I did. How long do you really need? Adeline was quiet. I don't know. A few weeks. Maybe more. It has to be perfect. If I move too soon, everything falls apart. She looked away. But you don't have to give me that. You've already given me more than anyone has in years. If you want me gone in the morning, I'll go. I'll figure something out. I don't want you gone in the morning, Wyatt heard himself say. The words surprised him as much as they surprised her. Adeline turned back to face him, searching his face. Wyatt, I got 90 days, Wyatt said. That's what the bank gave me. 90 days before they take this farm and everything on it, and there's not a thing in the world I can do to stop it. I've done the math 100 times. There's no version where I keep this place. My kids are going to lose the only home they've ever known, and I'm going to have to figure out how to raise them out of a truck if it comes to that. He looked at the flash drive. So you're worried about putting us in danger. I get it. But lady, he almost laughed. I'm already drowning. You showing up here didn't put me underwater. I was already under. That's not a reason to let me stay. No? Wyatt agreed. But here's one. He leaned forward. Since you got here, my daughter smiles. My son sleeps through the night. There's food in the house, and a woman who looks at my kids like they're worth something. And for the first time in a year, this house doesn't feel like a place where things end. It feels like a place where something might start. He held her eyes. I don't know what that's worth to you, but it's worth a lot to me. So you stay as long as you need. And when the time comes, when you make your move, he tapped the flash drive. You don't do it alone, you hear me? You've been running by yourself for 4 months. That stops now. Adeline Cross. CEO Billionaire. The woman who'd built an empire and lost it, who hadn't cried in front of another human being in longer than she could remember, put her face in her hands and wept. And Wyatt Coleman, a broke Navy veteran with 2 sleeping children and 90 days left on the only home he'd ever known, reached across the table and covered her hand with his. You're not fit for any man, huh? He said softly, remembering the words she'd said on his porch in the rain. That's what you told me, first thing out of your mouth. Adeline lifted her head, eyes red. I meant it. Look at me. I destroy everything I touch. I trusted the wrong people and it cost me everything. You should be running from me, Wyatt, not offering me shelter. See, that's where you're wrong, Wyatt said. You didn't destroy anything. Somebody stole from you. There's a difference. A man who gets robbed didn't fail, he got robbed. He squeezed her hand. And as for not being fit for any man, he shook his head. You fixed my son's crib with a screwdriver you found in a coffee can. You drove into a town you'd never seen at 5 a.m. so my kids could eat. You held a baby that screams at everybody and made him fall asleep. He met her eyes. I don't know what those fools in that conference room saw, but it wasn't you. Because the woman sitting at my table is about the most fit human being I've met in a long, long time. For a long moment, Adeline didn't say anything. Then she turned her hand over so their palms met, and she held on. "They're going to come," she whispered. "You know that. Eventually. If they find out where I am, they'll come. And they don't play fair, Wyatt. They'll come after you. Your farm. Your children. They'll use anything. Everything." "Let 'em come," Wyatt said, and 20 years of Navy steel settled into his voice. "I've stood on a deck in the middle of a war and held the line. I can hold a farm." He looked toward the hallway, toward the room where his children slept. "I've been fighting alone for a year, Adeline. Losing mostly. But I know how to fight." He looked back at her. "Question is, are you done running?" Adeline Cross wiped her eyes with the back of her free hand. She looked at the flash drive on the table, 18 months of evidence enough to burn her enemies to the ground. She looked at the man across from her, at the calluses on the hand holding hers, at the exhaustion, and the stubbornness, and the impossible undeserved kindness in his face. And for the first time in 4 months, she stopped watching the road. "Yeah," she said. "I think I'm done running." Outside, the wind died down. In the back bedroom, Eli slept in a crib that stood on 4 solid legs. Down the hall, Sadie slept with her hands unclenched for the first time in longer than her father could remember. And in the kitchen at 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 broken people sat holding hands across a table with one leg propped up on a phone book, not knowing yet that the war was already coming up the gravel road, that within a week, headlights would cut the darkness again, and this time, the men who stepped out of the black cars wouldn't be asking for a place to disappear. They'd be coming to make sure Adeline Cross disappeared for good. But that was still ahead of them. For tonight, there was coffee, and there was a hand to hold, and there was a house that had finally, for the first time in a year, stopped feeling like a place where things came to die. Wyatt Coleman had 90 days to save his farm. He had no idea he'd just gained the one ally in the world who could do it, or that saving her might cost him everything he had left. The first week after Adeline told him the truth, Wyatt kept waiting for the black cars. He didn't sleep much, but then he never had. He'd wake at every sound, the wind against the siding, the old refrigerator groaning to life, a branch scraping the roof. He'd lie there in the dark, with his heart going like a drum listening, and then he'd get up and check the windows the same way he'd watched her do her first night in the house. On the 4th night, he came out of the bedroom at 2 in the morning to find Adeline already at the kitchen window, coffee in hand, staring out at the black driveway. "You too, huh?" he said. She didn't turn around. "I keep thinking I hear an engine." "That's just the well pump. Kicks on around this time." He crossed to the counter and poured himself a cup. "Took me 3 weeks to stop grabbing for a rifle every time I heard it. You get used to it." "I don't think I want to get used to it," Adeline said. "That's the whole problem, isn't it? I got used to living like the world was going to hurt me. For 19 years, I woke up ready for a fight before my feet hit the floor." She finally looked at him. "I don't even remember what it felt like to just wake up." "Kids'll teach you," Wyatt said. "Eli doesn't care about the fight. Eli cares about breakfast." That got a small smile out of her. Eli's got his priorities straight. They stood there in the dark for a while, the two of them drinking coffee. Neither of them needed at 2 in the morning. And Wyatt thought not for the first time about how strange it was that the quietest, most peaceful moments of his last year had come after a fugitive billionaire showed up on his porch, running for her life. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "You've earned the right. This evidence you got, the drive." He kept his voice low, mindful of the kids down the hall. "You said you need to make the right calls to the right people. Reach out to somebody you trust. But you've been here almost 2 weeks now, and you haven't made a single call. You haven't touched a phone." He studied her. "Why not?" Adeline was quiet for a moment. "Because I don't know who to trust anymore," she said. "That's the thing they took from me, Wyatt. Not just the company. Not just the money. They took my ability to look at a person and know whether they're going to save me or sell me." She set her cup down. "I trusted my board. I handpicked every one of them. I trusted Damon with my whole life." "Damon's the fiancé." Was. Her jaw tightened. "Damon Reeve, my chief operating officer, the man I was going to marry in a garden I'd already paid a deposit on." She laughed short and bitter. He testified that I was mentally unfit. He looked a doctor in the eye and described episodes that never happened. And you know the worst part? For a second, 1 second, when they laid it all out in that conference room, I actually wondered if maybe I was the crazy one. That's how good they were. They almost made me doubt my own mind. But you didn't. No. Because I'd already found the evidence by then. I already knew what they'd done. She shook her head slowly. But if I hadn't, if I'd had even a little less proof, I think they might have convinced me. And that terrifies me more than the men in the elevator. The idea that people can just decide who you are and say it loud enough and long enough and make the whole world believe it. Make you believe it. Wyatt thought about the county workers with their clipboards. The way they looked at his house, his empty fridge, his exhausted face, and wrote things down. The word unfit had a way of following a man around. I know something about that, he said. Adeline looked at him. The child services people. He'd told her a few nights back. He hadn't meant to, but she'd asked why he flinched every time a car with a government plate went by on the highway and it had come out of him before he could stop it. They came out 3 times last year, Wyatt said. After Eli was born and Rebecca... He stopped. He still couldn't say his wife's name without his throat closing. After I was on my own. Somebody called them, anonymous. Said a single father couldn't handle a newborn, and a little girl said the house wasn't fit for kids. He wrapped both hands around his cup. They came out and they looked at everything. Looked in my fridge. Looked at Sadie. Asked her questions when I wasn't in the room. Asked a 5-year-old whether her daddy ever scared her. His voice roughened. You know what that does to a man? To stand in your own kitchen while a stranger decides whether you're allowed to keep your own children? Yes, Adeline said quietly. As a matter of fact, I do. And Wyatt looked at her and understood that in some strange way they'd both survived the same thing. The experience of having powerful people look at your whole life and declare it wanting. They didn't take them, he said. Sadie told them the truth. Told them her daddy read her stories and made her pancakes shaped like dinosaurs and never ever scared her. His eyes stung. A 5-year-old saved me. My own kid saved me telling the truth to people who came to take her away. Who called them? Adeline asked. The anonymous tip. Who was it? Never found out. Doesn't matter now. It might, Adeline said. And there was something in her voice, the CEO again, the strategist, the woman who'd spent 19 years thinking 3 moves ahead. In my experience, Wyatt, there's no such thing as anonymous. Somebody always benefits. Who wanted your kids gone? Who wanted you off this land? Wyatt frowned. Nobody. It's a failing farm at the end of a dead road. Who'd want... He stopped. Adeline watched him. What? The bank, Wyatt said slowly. There's a man at the bank, loan officer name of Curtis Vale. He's been after this property for 2 years. He set his cup down. Kept offering to buy me out. Kept coming around with these low-ball offers, real friendly about it, telling me he was doing me a favor. Said the land was worthless as a farm, but there's talk of a highway bypass coming through, and if that happens... He shook his head. I told him no. Told him this was my kid's inheritance, the only thing my daddy left me, and I wasn't selling it for pennies so he could flip it. And after you said no, that's when the foreclosure paperwork started moving faster, and that's... Wyatt's stomach dropped. That's around when child services showed up. Adeline's eyes had gone sharp and bright. Wyatt, listen to me. A man who wants your land, who can't buy it, who then finds his paperwork moving faster, and an anonymous tip trying to take your kids. That's not bad luck. That's a strategy. I've run that exact play. Not on families. She looked briefly ashamed. On companies. But it's the same play. You can't buy what you want, so you make it impossible for the person to hold on to it. You attack from 3 sides at once until they're too exhausted to fight, and then they hand it over just to make the pain stop. Wyatt felt something cold settle in his gut. You think Vale's been what deliberately... I think you should let me look at your paperwork, Adeline said. All of it. The loan, the foreclosure notice, every letter that man ever sent you. I built an $80 billion company reading contracts, Wyatt. If there's something crooked in your loan, I'll find it. Adeline. He rubbed his face. You're supposed to be hiding. You can't be poking around a small-town bank if somebody notices if word gets out that some woman's asking questions. I'll be careful. I won't use my name. I won't leave the house." She stepped closer. "You gave me shelter when you had nothing. Let me do this. Let me be useful. Please." Her voice dropped. "I've spent 4 months feeling like the most powerless person on earth, and I used to be one of the most powerful. Let me remember what it feels like to actually fix something." Wyatt looked at her for a long moment. Then he went to the coffee table, to the mountain of bills and notices he'd been drowning under for a year, and he brought the whole stack back to the kitchen and set it in front of her. "Knock yourself out," he said. She was still reading at dawn. Wyatt got up to start Eli's bottle and found her exactly where he'd left her, surrounded by papers she'd sorted into neat stacks across the whole table, a pen behind her ear. 3 sheets covered in her own handwritten notes. She looked up at him with an expression he hadn't seen on her before. Something hungry, something almost gleeful. "He made a mistake," she said. "Who did?" "Curtis Vale, your loan officer." She tapped one of the documents. "Wyatt, when you refinanced 3 years ago, the year after your father passed, when you took on the operating loan, do you remember signing an adjustable rate rider?" "I signed whatever they put in front of me. That was a bad year. I wasn't reading fine print." "I know. They counted on that." She slid the paper toward him. "The rate on this loan was supposed to be capped. There's a cap clause right here, plain as day. Your interest could not legally exceed a certain amount. But look at your payment history." She pulled another stack over. "Starting 18 months ago, they've been charging you above the cap, every single month. Consistently. It's not a mistake, Wyatt. A mistake happens once. This is systematic. They deliberately overcharged you, drove up your balance, and manufactured the default that's letting them foreclose." Wyatt stared at the numbers. He wasn't a numbers man, never had been, but even he could see it once she laid it out. The line that was supposed to be the ceiling. The payments climbing right through it, month after month. "So the foreclosure is potentially illegal," Adeline said. "If they charged you rates they weren't allowed to charge and used those inflated charges to declare you in default, then the whole foreclosure is built on fraud. And that's before we even get into whether Vale had a conflict of interest, given that he was simultaneously trying to buy the property he was foreclosing on." She sat back. "In my world, this is what we call leverage." Wyatt didn't say anything for a moment. He was looking at the papers and then at her, and something was happening in his chest that he didn't have a name for. Something like hope, which was a dangerous thing for a man like him to feel, because hope had a way of setting you up for a longer fall. "You did this in one night," he said. "I did this in about 2 hours. I spent the other 4 making sure I was right." She gathered the notes together. "Wyatt, you might be able to save your farm. Not with money, with the truth. If we take this to the right lawyer, if we can prove the overcharges were deliberate, you don't just stop the foreclosure. You might have a case against the bank, against Vale personally." "I can't afford a lawyer." "You don't need to afford one. You need to find one who'll take it on contingency, because a bank defrauding a widowed veteran out of his family farm is exactly the kind of case a hungry attorney dreams about." She smiled, and it was the first time he'd seen her smile with her whole face. "Trust me, I've bought and sold enough lawyers to know how they think." "Widowed," Wyatt repeated softly. Adeline's smile faded. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. No, it's..." He shook his head. "It's just been a while since anybody said it out loud. Widowed. That's what I am, I guess. I keep saying single dad because widower sounds like I'm 40 years older than I am. Like I should be sitting on a porch missing somebody instead of raising 2 kids who never got to know her." Adeline was quiet. Then, "How did she die?" "You don't have to tell me." Wyatt got the bottle ready, tested it on his wrist. For a moment he didn't think he was going to answer. "Complications," he said finally. "After Eli. There was something went wrong during the delivery. They said it was rare, 1 in something thousand." She held him for about an hour. His hands were steady, but his voice wasn't. "And then she was just gone. And I drove home from that hospital with a newborn and a 5-year-old asking where mommy was, and I have been running on empty ever since." He looked up. "So no, this house hasn't had a good year. You showing up, it's the first thing that's gone right since before Eli was born." Adeline stood up from the table. She crossed the kitchen slowly, and for a second, Wyatt thought she was going to do something, touch him, or he didn't know what, but she just took the bottle out of his hand. "Go sit down," she said. "You've been up all night worrying about cars that didn't come. I've got him." "You don't have to, Wyatt." She held his eyes. "Let somebody carry something for once, just for 5 minutes. The world won't end." And he did. He sat down at his own kitchen table in the gray light of morning and watched a billionaire feed his son, and he let himself just for 5 minutes, not carry anything at all. The trouble came when it came from a direction Wyatt didn't expect. It was a Tuesday. Adeline had been at the farm 3 weeks. She'd stopped flinching at every passing car. She'd started laughing at Sadie's knock-knock jokes. She'd learned to run the ancient washing machine that required a specific kick to start its spin cycle. She'd even twice let Wyatt catch her singing to Eli when she thought no one was listening, some song in a language he didn't recognize, low and sweet, that made the baby's eyes go heavy. Wyatt was out in the north pasture when he saw the sedan turn up the driveway. Not a black SUV, not the black cars he'd been dreading. Just a plain gray sedan with a government plate, and a woman getting out of it with a satchel over her shoulder and a lanyard around her neck, and Wyatt's whole body went cold because he knew that lanyard. He'd seen it 3 times before. Child services. He dropped the fence wire and ran. He came around the side of the house, just as the woman reached the porch, just as the front door opened, and Adeline stepped out. Adeline in a t-shirt and jeans she'd bought at the town's one clothing store with Eli on her hip, and Sadie peeking out from behind her leg. "Can I help you?" Adeline said, and her voice was perfectly pleasant. But Wyatt saw the way her body had gone still and alert, the way a person goes still when they've spent 4 months being hunted. "I'm looking for Wyatt Coleman," the woman said. "I'm Diane Pryor from the Department of Family Services. I have a report I need to follow up on." "I'm here," Wyatt called, coming up the porch steps 2 at a time, breathing hard. "I'm Wyatt. What report?" Diane Pryor looked at him, and then looked pointedly carefully at Adeline, at the baby on her hip, at the little girl clinging to her leg. And Wyatt watched her write something down before she'd said a single word. "Mr. Coleman," she said, "we received a report expressing concern about the welfare of the children in this home. Specifically concern about an unrelated adult female residing here, and questions about the stability and appropriateness of the living situation." She looked up. "I'm going to need to come inside and speak with you. And with the children. Separately." Wyatt felt the floor tilt under him. "Who filed it?" he heard himself ask. "The report. Who filed it? That's confidential." "Of course it is." Wyatt's hands had curled into fists at his sides, and he made himself uncurl them. "Ma'am, you were out here 3 times last year. 3 times. And every time you found nothing because there's nothing to find. I'm raising my kids. That's it. That's the whole story. The situation appears to have changed since my last visit," Diane Pryor said, and her eyes went back to Adeline. "There's now an adult woman living in the home. A woman whose name doesn't appear on any lease or deed, whom no one in town seems to know, who arrived under circumstances I'd describe as unusual." She let that sit. "You can understand why that raises questions, Mr. Coleman. A single father, a struggling farm, a mysterious woman appearing in the middle of the night. It's the kind of thing that concerns us." And Wyatt understood all at once exactly what had happened. Somebody had watched. Somebody had seen Adeline arrive or seen her in town and reported it, and whoever it was had known exactly which lever to pull, the same lever that had been pulled before. Unfit. The word followed a man around. "Curtis Vale," Wyatt said. Diane Pryor's face didn't move, but something flickered behind her eyes. "I'm not able to discuss—" "It was Vale, wasn't it, the bank man?" Wyatt stepped forward. "He wants my land. He couldn't buy it, so now he's trying to take my kids to break me. Same as last year. Same exact—" "Mr. Coleman, I'd advise you to calm down." "Don't tell me to calm down." It came out louder than he meant, and he saw Sadie flinch, saw her press harder into Adeline's leg, and it broke something in him. He lowered his voice, immediately made himself breathe. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry baby daddy's not mad." He crouched down. "Sadie, look at me. Everything's fine. This lady's just gonna ask us some questions. Okay? Just like the game we played before. You just tell the truth. Can you do that?" Sadie nodded, but her eyes were huge. And that was when Adeline spoke. "Ms. Pryor," she said, and her voice had changed completely. Gone was the pleasant neighbor. In its place was something Wyatt had only glimpsed before: the CEO, the woman who'd run an empire. Her spine had straightened, her chin had come up, and when she spoke it was with a calm, cutting authority that made even the child services worker take half a step back. "May I ask you a question before you begin?" Yes. "This report. You said it expressed concern about an unrelated adult female, me." Adeline shifted Eli higher on her hip. "Did the report include a description of me, a name? Any specific allegation of harm to these children? Or did it simply note that a woman was present in the home?" Diane Pryor hesitated. "I'm not able to discuss the contents. Because here's what I think," Adeline continued, as if she hadn't spoken. "I think you drove out here on the strength of a report that contains no actual allegation of harm, no neglect, no abuse, no injury to either child. I think the entire substance of the complaint is that I exist and that I'm here." She smiled, and it did not reach her eyes. "And I think you know as a professional with what I'd guess is considerable experience that there's a woman in the house is not by itself grounds for anything. It's not a crime for an adult to reside in a home with a parent and children. Is it?" "No, but the circumstances." "The circumstances." Adeline nodded slowly. "Let me tell you the circumstances, Ms. Pryor, since you're concerned about them. Mr. Coleman is a decorated Navy veteran raising 2 children alone after losing his wife in childbirth. His fridge until recently was empty, not because he doesn't care, but because a bank has been systematically overcharging him on an illegal loan in an effort to drive him off land they want to seize. I've reviewed the documentation myself. It's fraud and it's provable, and there's a very good chance the man behind it is also the man who filed the report that brought you out here today." She let that land. "So before you come into this home and interrogate a frightened 6-year-old, I'd encourage you to consider whether you want your name on a case that's about to become extremely public extremely quickly. Because the eviction of a widowed veteran and his children through a fraudulent foreclosure aided by a weaponized child welfare complaint is exactly the kind of story that gets picked up, statewide, nationally even." She smiled again. "I have some experience with how these stories travel." The porch was dead silent. Diane Pryor was staring at Adeline now with a completely different expression. Wary, recalculating the look of a person who'd come expecting an easy visit and found something with teeth. "Who are you?" she asked slowly. And Wyatt held his breath because he knew what a dangerous question that was. Knew that everything Adeline had built her survival on for 4 months was the answer to that question staying secret. Adeline didn't miss a beat. "I'm a friend of the family," she said, "with a background in corporate law, who happened to be visiting when a very interesting set of financial documents came to light." She shifted Eli again, and the baby grabbed a fistful of her hair, and she didn't so much as wince. "You're welcome to come inside, Ms. Pryor. Look in the fridge, it's full now. Look at the children, they're healthy, they're happy, and the little one's about to fall asleep on my shoulder. Ask Sadie whatever you like. She'll tell you her father is the best man she knows. But I'd ask you to do it quickly and gently, and then I'd ask you to go back to your office and take a very hard look at who filed this report and why. Because I promise you, Ms. Pryor," and here her voice dropped soft and lethal, "I am going to be looking at exactly the same thing, and I'm very, very good at it." Diane Pryor stood on the porch for a long moment. Then she looked at Sadie. Really looked at her, at the healthy, well-fed, clearly loved little girl clinging to a woman who was clearly protecting her, and something in the caseworker's shoulders came down. "I do need to come inside," she said, but her voice had changed. "It's protocol. I have to document the visit. But," she glanced at Wyatt, "if what I find is a full fridge and healthy children, then that's what my report will say. And Mr. Coleman," she paused, "for what it's worth, this is the 4th report on your family in 18 months, all from the same source and all of them unfounded. That pattern is noted in your file. It won't help whoever keeps filing them." Wyatt let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding for a year. The visit took 20 minutes. Diane Pryor looked in the fridge, which was full. She looked at Eli, who was fat and happy and drooling on Adeline's shoulder. She spoke to Sadie in the living room, and Wyatt made himself stay in the kitchen, made himself trust his daughter, and he heard through the wall Sadie's small, clear voice saying, "My daddy makes dinosaur pancakes, and Miss Adeline reads me stories with different voices, and this is the best my house has ever been. The best my house has ever been." Wyatt had to grip the edge of the counter. When Diane Pryor left, she paused at her car, and she looked back at the porch where the three of them stood. Wyatt and Adeline with the baby and Sadie between them. "Off the record," she said. "That loan business, if it's what she says it is." She nodded at Adeline. "You should get a lawyer today, not tomorrow. Today. And you should file a complaint about the harassment through this office. On the record." She got in her car. "Some of us don't like being used as a weapon any more than you like being on the wrong end of one." And then she was gone. Gray sedan disappearing down the gravel road, and Wyatt stood on his porch and realized his legs were shaking. "You okay?" Adeline asked quietly. "No," Wyatt said honestly. "I've been terrified of that lanyard for a year. Every time I close my eyes, I see somebody driving off with my kids." He looked at her. "And you stood on my porch and talked her down like it was nothing. Like you do it every day." "I used to do it every day," Adeline said. "Just with lawyers and reporters and hostile board members instead of caseworkers." She looked down at Eli asleep. Now his cheek mashed against her collarbone. "I forgot I could do that. For 4 months I've been so busy being afraid I forgot I used to be the thing people were afraid of." Her voice was strange, wondering almost. "That felt good, Wyatt. God help me. That felt better than anything has in months." Wyatt looked at her. This woman who'd shown up on his porch in the rain saying she wasn't fit for any man who'd knelt in his mud and begged to disappear, and who had just stood on his porch and made a state official back down to protect his children. "You're not fit for any man," he said, echoing her again, and now there was something almost like a joke in it. "That's what you told me. Remember." "I remember. I'm going to keep bringing that up," Wyatt said, "every single time you do something that proves you were dead wrong. And lady, at this rate, I'm going to be bringing it up a lot." Adeline laughed, a real one, startled out of her, and Eli stirred against her shoulder, and Sadie tugged on Wyatt's hand and asked if the scary lady was gone, and could they have dinosaur pancakes for dinner? Even though it was dinner time, and for a moment, standing on that broken porch, it felt like they'd won something. They hadn't. Not yet. Wyatt knew that even as he let himself feel it, the foreclosure was still coming. Curtis Vale was still out there, and now he knew, because Diane Pryor's visit would surely find its way back to him, that his weapon had missed. That there was a woman at the Coleman farm who'd looked a state official in the eye and made her retreat. A woman who was asking questions about his loans. And somewhere in a city 11 hours away, a man named Damon Reeve and a board of directors were still hunting for Adeline Cross, still frozen in the terrible uncertainty of not knowing where she was or what she had, and the longer she stayed hidden, the more desperate they'd get. Two enemies. Two men who wanted things Wyatt and Adeline were standing in front of, and sooner or later, one of them was going to find the loose thread that led up the gravel road to the farm. But that afternoon, Wyatt Coleman stood in his kitchen and made dinosaur pancakes for dinner, because his daughter asked him to, and because for one more day, the people he loved were safe under his roof. Adeline set the table. Eli banged a spoon against his high chair and shrieked with laughter at nothing. And when Wyatt slid a pancake shaped like a stegosaurus onto Sadie's plate, and she gasped like he'd hung the moon. He caught Adeline watching them both, with an expression on her face he'd never seen there before. It took him a second to place it because it had been so long since he'd seen it on anybody, including himself. It was longing. She caught him looking, and she glanced away fast, busying herself with the syrup, and neither of them said anything. But Wyatt understood in that moment that the woman across his kitchen table wasn't just hiding from her enemies anymore. She was starting to want something. Something she didn't think she was allowed to have. Something she'd told him on her knees in the rain that she wasn't fit for. And Wyatt Coleman, widower, veteran father of two, a man with $11.90 and nothing left to lose, was starting to want it too. The wanting didn't go anywhere, but neither of them touched it. There was too much else to do. The morning after Diane Pryor's visit, Adeline sat Wyatt down at the kitchen table with a legal pad and a cup of coffee, and told him it was time to fight back. We can't just wait for them anymore, she said. Veil the board, all of it. As long as we sit here reacting, they get to choose the ground. That's the mistake I made for 4 months I ran. I let them decide where the fight happened. I'm not doing that again, and I'm not letting you do it either. I don't have the money to go on offense, Wyatt said. You know that. I've got $11. Yes, you've mentioned. She almost smiled. But you have something better than money, Wyatt. You have a bank that committed fraud, a caseworker who's already on record, noting a pattern of harassment, and me. She tapped the legal pad. So here's what we're going to do. First thing, you call a lawyer. Today, like Ms. Pryor said. I've made a list of 3 firms in the county seat that handle predatory lending cases. One of them, Hartwell and Boone, has a partner who used to sue banks for a living. He'll take this on contingency the second he sees your loan documents. I'd stake my reputation on it. She paused. What's left of it? Wyatt looked at the neat list in her handwriting. You did all this last night. I don't sleep much. You know that. She slid the pad toward him. Call Hartwell and Boone. Ask for a man named Gideon Boone. Tell him you're a veteran facing a fraudulent foreclosure, and you have documentation of systematic overcharging above a contractual rate cap. Use those exact words, systematic and rate cap. It'll get his attention. Wyatt made the call from the porch, pacing the way he always paced when he was nervous. Adeline watched him through the window with Eli on her hip, and she saw the moment the lawyer said, yes, saw Wyatt stop pacing, saw his shoulders drop, saw him press the heel of his hand against his eyes. He came back in, looking like a man who'd been holding his breath underwater and finally surfaced. He wants to see me Thursday, Wyatt said. He said, his voice caught. He said, if it's what I described, I'm not just going to stop the foreclosure. He said the bank's going to be paying me. I told you. Adeline's whole face was lit up. I told you, Wyatt. You told me. He sat down heavily. I've been carrying this for a year. A whole year, thinking I was going to lose everything. Thinking it was my fault. Thinking I just wasn't good enough to hold on to my own daddy's land. He looked up at her. And it took you 2 hours to find out it was a con. 2 hours. It took me 2 hours because I've spent 20 years learning how people steal, Adeline said quietly. That's not something to be proud of, Wyatt. Half the reason I could spot Vale's game so fast is that I've watched people run it. I've been in rooms where men decided to squeeze somebody out of what was theirs, and I told myself it was just business. She looked away. The board did it to me, and I called it karma. Like the universe was finally collecting on all the times I looked the other way. You never did to anybody what they did to you, Wyatt said. I don't believe that. You don't know that. I know you, Wyatt said. 3 weeks and I know you better than I knew people I served with for years. And the woman I know drove into a strange town at 5 a.m. to buy formula for a baby that wasn't hers. That woman didn't squeeze anybody out of anything. Adeline didn't answer. But something moved in her face and she turned away to fuss with Eli's blanket, and Wyatt let her have the moment. Thursday. Wyatt drove to the county seat in his truck that ran on faith, wearing the one good shirt he owned with a manila folder of documents on the passenger seat that Adeline had organized so carefully it looked like a legal exhibit. She'd wanted to come. She couldn't, of course. She couldn't show her face in a lawyer's office. Couldn't risk her name in any system, so she'd done the next best thing and prepared him like a general briefing a soldier. Boone's going to ask you questions, she'd said, straightening his collar in the kitchen that morning in a gesture so domestic it made both of them go still. Answer them plainly. Don't apologize. Don't call yourself a failure. Don't say you should have read the fine print. Don't take the blame. You are the victim of a crime. Sit in that chair like a man who got robbed because you did. She'd stepped back. And when he asks how you figured out the overcharges, I say a friend with a finance background helped me look at the paperwork. A friend. Right. No name. No name? Wyatt had agreed. And then, because he couldn't help it, you know, for somebody hiding from the whole world, you sure do run a tight operation. I ran a tight operation for 19 years, Adeline had said. It's the one thing they couldn't take from me. Now go. And Wyatt. She'd caught his arm at the door. You're going to walk out of that office having taken the first thing back. Remember what that feels like. You're going to need to remember it. He remembered it. He walked out of Gideon Boone's office 2 hours later, having signed a representation agreement with a lawyer who'd looked at his documents and gotten a gleam in his eye, like a shark scenting blood, who'd said the words injunction and punitive damages, and were going to bury them. And Wyatt sat in his truck in the parking lot for a full 10 minutes before he could drive, because for the first time in a year, somebody with power was on his side. He called Adeline from the road. She answered on the first ring. Well? He filed something called an emergency motion, Wyatt said. This afternoon, to stop the foreclosure while they investigate. He says, Adeline, he says the foreclosure's frozen, as of today. They can't take the farm, not while the case is open. He heard her exhale on the other end of the line, long and shaky, and he realized she'd been just as scared as he was. You did it, she said. We did it. Don't you, we did it. He gripped the wheel. I couldn't have done any of this without you. You know that. I'd have signed that farm over to Vale by summer and never known any better. You'd have found a way, Adeline said. You're a survivor, Wyatt. It's the first thing I saw in you. A man holding a screaming baby at 3 a.m, staring down a foreclosure notice and still standing. Her voice softened. I knew the second I saw you that you weren't going to quit. That's why I stayed. Not just because it was safe. Because I was so tired of being around people who quit on each other, and here was a man who didn't know how. Wyatt didn't say anything for a moment. The road hummed under him. Come home, Adeline said. Sadie made you a card. It's got about 40 exclamation points on it. She doesn't fully understand what happened, but she knows it's good and she wants to celebrate. Come home. Like it was hers too. Like it was theirs. I'm coming home, Wyatt said, and hung up before his voice could give him away. That night they celebrated with the closest thing to a feast the farm had seen in a year, a chicken. Adeline roasted real mashed potatoes and a store-bought cake that Sadie had insisted on with "We won" written across it in blue frosting, even though the woman at the bakery had gotten confused about what they'd won. Eli sat in his high chair and smashed cake into his own hair. Sadie gave a speech. It was a very long speech for a 6-year-old, and most of it was about pancakes, but it ended with her raising her cup of milk and saying, To Daddy, who is the best daddy, and to Miss Adeline, who is my second best friend after Daddy. And Wyatt had to leave the table for a minute again. When he came back, Adeline had tears in her eyes too. Second best friend, she said, watching Sadie carefully lick frosting off her fingers. Wyatt, She stopped. I don't have anybody. Do you know that? In my whole life, I have accountants and lawyers and a board that betrayed me and a fiancé who tried to have me committed. But I don't have a single person who'd call me a friend just because they liked me. She wiped her eyes. And your daughter just made me her second best friend for reading her stories with different voices. That's... Her voice broke. That's the best thing anyone's given me in 20 years. She means it too, Wyatt said. Sadie doesn't hand that out. She wouldn't even call my brother a friend, and he brings her candy every time. Adeline laughed wetly. Across the table, Sadie, oblivious, was trying to feed a bite of cake to Eli, who was delighted. And Wyatt thought this is what it's supposed to look like. A full table, laughter, somebody to celebrate with. He'd forgotten. For a year he'd been so deep in survival that he'd forgotten this was even possible, that a house could feel like this, warm and loud and alive. He also thought, with a cold undercurrent that never fully went away, it can't last. She's going to leave. The second it's safe, she's going to make her calls and take back her empire and walk out that door back to a world of $80 billion and private jets, and this, the chicken and the frosting, and the second best friend, is going to be a story she tells herself on lonely nights, if she remembers it at all. He didn't say any of that. He just watched his daughter and the billionaire laugh over a smashed cake, and he let himself have the night. The reckoning came a week later, and it came as these things do, through a phone. Adeline had a burner phone, a cheap prepaid thing she'd bought in some gas station on her 11-hour flight that she kept turned off 99% of the time, and only powered on in the dead of night once a week to check a single email account. She'd explained it to Wyatt. It was her lifeline to the one person in her old world she still tentatively trusted, an old friend from before the money, a woman named Priya who'd been Adeline's assistant back in the garage days and had risen with her, and had alone among everyone refused to sign anything against her. Priya's the only one who knows I'm alive, Adeline had said. She doesn't know where I am. I'd never put that on her. They'd get it out of her and put her in danger. But she's my eyes. She tells me what they're doing, when it's safe to move. That night, Wyatt woke at 2 to the blue glow of the burner phone in the kitchen, and Adeline sitting very still staring at the screen, her face gone white. "What is it?" He was on his feet instantly. "Adeline, what happened?" She didn't look up. "They found me." The words dropped the temperature of the whole room. "What do you mean they found you? How you've been, we've been so careful." "Not here." She finally looked up and her eyes were huge. "Not the farm. Not yet. But they know I'm in the state. They traced—" She swallowed. "Priya says an investigator flagged a credit charge, the formula, that first morning. I used a card." Wyatt's stomach dropped. "You said you'd never—" "It was the first morning, Wyatt, before I understood how thorough they were. I'd been driving 11 hours. I wasn't thinking I bought groceries with a card I thought was clean." Her hands were shaking. "It wasn't clean. Nothing's clean. They've been watching every account with my name anywhere near it, and I—" She pressed her palms flat on the table to stop them trembling. "It took them this long to trace it because it was cashback at a rural store, no name attached to the store's system, but they got it. They know I bought formula and groceries in this county 3 weeks ago. They know I'm here. They know I'm near a baby." Her voice cracked. "They know I'm somewhere with a child, Wyatt." Wyatt sat down slowly. "Okay," he said. "Okay, let's think. They know you're in the county. That's a lot of ground. There's 40 farms out here, 3 towns. They'll narrow it," Adeline said flatly. "That's what they do. They'll send people. They'll ask questions. A beautiful stranger appearing in a small town 3 weeks ago. Somebody at that store remembers me, Wyatt. Somebody always remembers. They'll knock on doors. They'll find the store and the clerk who was confused about the rich woman buying formula at 5 a.m., and he'll tell them she drove off toward the county road, and there's exactly 1 occupied farm at the end of that road." She looked at him. "Mine took 4 months, and I was a professional at hiding. This town isn't going to hold for a week." The kitchen was silent, except for the hum of the old refrigerator. "Then we move first?" Wyatt said. Adeline blinked. "What? You said it yourself, a week ago. We stop reacting. We stop letting them pick the ground." He leaned forward. "You've got the drive. You've got 18 months of evidence that puts every one of them in prison. You've been sitting on it for 4 months waiting for the perfect moment, waiting to be somewhere safe with people you trust." He held her eyes. "Adeline, there's no perfect moment. There's no safer place than this coming. They found the thread. It leads here. So you don't wait for them to pull it. You blow the whole thing up first right now while you've still got the choice of when. If I surface, they'll, what, kill you?" Wyatt's voice was hard. "They can't kill a story that's already public. That's the whole game, isn't it? The reason they wanted you dead was so the evidence died with you. But if the evidence is already out, if it's with the FBI, with reporters, with 100 people at once, then killing you doesn't help them. It just makes them murderers on top of thieves." He tapped the table. "The drive is your shield, Adeline, but only if you use it. Locked in your coat pocket, it's just a thing they want to make disappear. Out in the world, it's the thing that protects you." Adeline stared at him, and Wyatt watched something happen behind her eyes. Watched the frightened woman who'd been running for 4 months and the CEO who'd built an empire finally line up, finally point in the same direction. "You sound like me," she said slowly. "The old me. The one who ran the company. That's Wyatt. That's exactly the kind of move I would have made before I got scared." Her voice strengthened. "Get ahead of it. Make them react for once. Choose the ground." "So choose it. I need Gideon Boone." Wyatt blinked. "My lawyer. Your lawyer who used to sue banks and buries people, yes." Adeline was standing now, the fear burning off her like fog in sun, replaced by something focused and electric. "I've been telling myself I need to find people I trust. In my old world, my old lawyers, my old contacts. But they're all compromised. Every one of them's been near the board near Damon. I can't trust any of them." She started pacing. But a small-town attorney in a county, nobody's ever heard of a man with no connection to Meridian Global. No connection to anyone in that world. A man who already represents you, who already has reason to be looking at fraud and financial crime. She turned to Wyatt. He's clean. He's completely, perfectly clean. They'd never in a million years think to watch him. And he's already got the temperament. You said it yourself, a shark who wants to bury somebody. You want to give your evidence to Gideon Boone. I want to build the whole case with Gideon Boone. Quietly. Him and one or two people he trusts. We take the drive, we organize 18 months of evidence into something a federal prosecutor can charge. We line up a reporter one, a good one at a national paper, and we set it all up like a bomb with 100 fuses. And then, on a day, we choose all at once. She brought her hands together. The FBI gets the evidence, the reporter gets the story, and I get a lawyer standing next to me in front of a camera saying, Adeline Cross is alive. She was illegally removed from her own company through fraud and forgery, and here is the proof. Her eyes were shining. By the time Damon and the board even know I've surfaced, it's already over. There's no accident they can arrange that saves them. The truth's already out. They can only watch it happen. Wyatt looked at her. Really looked at her, and he saw maybe for the first time fully who she'd been before the world knocked her down. Not the frightened woman on his porch. Not even the tender one who sang to his son. This was the woman who'd started a company in a garage with $9,000 and built it into an empire. Ferocious. Brilliant. Absolutely certain. There she is, he said quietly. Adeline stopped. What? The woman who built an $80 billion company. Wyatt shook his head slowly. You've been here 3 weeks, and I've seen her twice now. On the porch with Diane Pryor, and right now. And both times, he searched for the words. Both times you looked more alive than any person I ever met. Adeline, whatever they told you in that conference room, that you were unfit, unstable, done. He stood up. They were terrified of this. Of the woman standing in my kitchen right now. That's why they had to lie and cheat to get you out. Because they couldn't beat her fair. Adeline's certainty flickered not doubt, but emotion breaking through the strategy. Wyatt, it's true. You know it's true. I know I'm about to bring a war to your doorstep. Adeline said, and the fear came back, but it was a different fear now, not for herself. That's what I know. Wyatt, the second I surface, the second I start building this with Boone, if anything leaks, if they figure out where I've been, they'll come here. To this farm. To your children. I told you they'd use anything, and they will. I could be signing you and Sadie and Eli up for something you can't imagine. She shook her head. I can't ask you to. You're not asking, Wyatt said. I'm offering. There's a difference. You keep trying to protect me from a choice I already made 3 weeks ago when I opened that door. He stepped closer. I told you the night you showed me that drive. You don't do this alone. That wasn't a one-time thing, Adeline. That was a promise. I don't make many, and I don't break the ones I make. They were close now, closer than they'd let themselves be, and the kitchen was very quiet, and for a moment, the war, and the drive, and the black cars all seemed very far away. Why? Adeline whispered. Why would you do this? Risk your kids, your farm, everything you have left for a woman you've known 3 weeks. It doesn't make sense. Nobody does this. Nobody in my whole life ever did this. Because, Wyatt said, and then he stopped, because the true answer was one he wasn't sure he was allowed to say. He said a different true thing instead. Because my daughter smiles now. Because my son knows your voice. Because for 3 weeks this house has felt like a home instead of a place I'm slowly losing. He met her eyes. You gave that to us. Nobody made you. You showed up needing to disappear, and instead you fixed my son's crib, and saved my farm, and stood between my kids and the state. So no, I'm not going to let you walk into a war alone, and I'm not going to let you talk me out of standing next to you. You want to argue about it, we can argue. But you'll lose. I outrank you here. Adeline laughed a startled, wet, helpless sound, and then before either of them fully decided to, she stepped forward and put her arms around him and pressed her face into his shoulder. And Wyatt held her, this woman who'd built empires and lost them, who'd been on her knees in the rain 3 weeks ago, swearing she wasn't fit for any man. He held her, and he felt her shaking, and he understood that she wasn't crying from fear. She was crying because someone had finally refused to leave. "Okay," she said into his shoulder. "Okay, we do it together. We build it with Boone. We choose the ground." She pulled back just enough to look at him, her hands still on his arms. "But Wyatt, the first sign it's coming here, the first hint of headlights on that road that aren't Boone's, the kids come first. Before me. Before the case. Before anything. You get Sadie and Eli somewhere safe, and you don't let anything I brought here touch them. Promise me that. Promise me the same way I know you keep them." "I promise," Wyatt said. "Say it. Say the words. The kids come first, before you, before the case, before anything." He held her gaze. "Always. But Adeline, it's not going to come to that, because we're going to be faster and smarter than they are. You said it yourself. Boone's clean, they'll never see it coming, and by the time they do, it's already over." He almost smiled. "You're not the one running anymore. You're the one setting the trap. Remember what that feels like." Adeline took a breath, and when she let it out, something in her had changed, the last of the fugitive falling away, the fighter stepping fully into the light. "Call Boone in the morning," she said. "Tell him you need a private meeting. No names on the phone. Tell him it's connected to your case but bigger, and it's the kind of thing that makes a career." Her voice had gone crisp, commanding. The CEO fully returned. "And Wyatt, when we go to that office, I'm coming with you. It's time. I've hidden long enough. It's time to stop being the woman they made disappear and start being the woman who takes it all back." Wyatt looked at her, at Adeline Cross, standing in his broken kitchen at 2 a.m, ready to go to war. And he thought about how 3 weeks ago she'd knelt in his mud, begging to vanish, and now she was standing in his light, refusing to. "There she is," he said again, softer this time. And outside, far down the gravel road, the night was still empty. No headlights yet, no black cars. Just the wind moving through the dead corn, and a well pump kicking on somewhere in the dark, and 2 people in a lit kitchen deciding together to stop running and start fighting, not knowing how little time they had left before the choice would be made for them. Gideon Boone did not look like a shark. He looked like a tired man in his 60s with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead and a coffee stain on his tie. And when Wyatt and Adeline walked into his office that morning, he glanced up from a file and said, "Coleman, good, you brought the—" And then he saw Adeline, and he stopped. He looked at her for a long moment. "You're not from around here," he said. "No," Adeline said. "I'm not." Boone set down his pen. He looked at Wyatt, then back at Adeline, and Wyatt watched something sharpen behind the tired eyes, the shark after all coming up from the deep. "Close the door," Boone said. "And somebody better start talking, because Mr. Coleman said on the phone this was bigger than a foreclosure, and I've been doing this 31 years, and I know the look of somebody who's about to hand me either the best case of my life or the worst mistake." He folded his hands. "Which is it?" Adeline closed the door. She sat down across from him, and she reached into her coat, into the inside pocket she never let out of arm's reach, and she set the matte black flash drive on his desk. "My name is Adeline Cross," she said. "Until 4 months ago, I was the founder and chief executive officer of Meridian Global. You may have heard of it." Boone went very still. "On this drive," Adeline continued, "is 18 months of evidence documenting how the board of directors I appointed in concert with my former fiancé and chief operating officer illegally removed me from my own company through forged medical records, fabricated testimony wire fraud, and the theft of intellectual property they've been quietly selling to a competitor. There are also—" Her voice didn't waver. "Credible threats against my life made to ensure I never surfaced to contest any of it. I've spent 4 months in hiding. I stopped hiding this week, and I need a lawyer with no connection to my old world, no way for them to see me coming to help me take it all back and put every one of them in prison." She held his eyes. "Mr. Coleman speaks very highly of you, and you're the only attorney in 100 miles they'd never think to watch." The office was silent. Somewhere down the hall, a phone rang and went unanswered. Gideon Boone looked at the flash drive for a long moment. Then he reached up, took the glasses off his forehead, folded them, and set them down beside it. "Ms. Cross," he said slowly, "I have spent 31 years watching banks and corporations grind ordinary people into dust, and I have won some and lost more. And I always told myself that one day the right case would walk through my door, the one where I get to hand a powerful institution its own head." He leaned back. "I did not expect it to walk in on a Thursday behind a foreclosure file. But I have learned not to argue with the Lord about his timing." He put his hand flat on the desk. "Tell me everything, from the beginning. And don't leave anything out, because if I'm going to war with a Fortune 500 board of directors out of a strip mall office, I need to know every single thing they can throw at us before they throw it." So she told him. All of it. The garage and the $9,000, the 19 years, the slow discovery that Damon and the board had been selling her out to a competitor for 18 months. The confrontation, the conference room, the forged doctors, the man in the elevator. It took 2 hours. Wyatt sat beside her the whole time, and twice when her voice caught. When the memory of the elevator got too close, he reached over without thinking and put his hand over hers on the arm of the chair, and both times she gripped it and kept going. Boone listened without interrupting. He took notes on a legal pad in dense, cramped handwriting, and when she finished, he sat for a moment in silence. "Ms. Cross," he said finally, "I'm going to tell you 3 things, and I need you to hear all 3. He held up a finger. "First, this is real and it's provable, and if a fraction of what's on that drive is what you say it is, we can bury them. I mean that literally. Federal charges, prison. You get your company back and they get numbers instead of names." A second finger. "Second, the moment we move, it becomes the most dangerous week of your life, because desperate people with everything to lose do desperate things, and we will be taking everything from them all at once." A third finger. "And third?" He looked at Wyatt. "The fact that you've been hiding on this man's farm with his children means the danger doesn't stop at you. If they trace you here before we're ready, those kids are in the blast radius. So we move carefully, and we move fast, and we do not fumble a single step." He set the pad down. "Are you both prepared for that?" "Yes," Adeline said. Wyatt looked at Boone. "The kids come first," he said. "Whatever we do the second there's any danger to them, everything stops and I get them out. That's the one rule I don't bend." Boone nodded slowly. "Good rule. Keep it." He picked up the flash drive, turned it over in his fingers. "All right. Here's how we do this." What followed was the most focused 2 weeks of Wyatt Coleman's life. Boone brought in exactly one other person, a forensic accountant named Ruth Delgado, a woman he'd worked with for 20 years, who he swore on his mother's grave was untouchable. Ruth drove out to the farm in an unmarked car after dark, 3 nights running, and she and Adeline sat at Wyatt's kitchen table with 2 laptops and the contents of the drive spread between them, building the case brick by brick, matching wire transfers to dates, tying forged documents to the people who'd signed them, assembling a timeline so airtight that Boone said a first-year prosecutor could win with it. Wyatt watched Adeline work those nights, and he understood better than ever what she'd lost. She was extraordinary. She held 19 months of financial crime in her head like other people held a grocery list. She could look at a transaction and tell Ruth which shell company it flowed through and why. She caught 2 things even Ruth had missed. And when she worked leaning over the laptop, hair falling in her face, calling out account numbers from memory, she was so completely ferociously alive that it made Wyatt's chest ache, because he could see exactly the woman a board of directors had been so afraid of that they'd rather forge her insanity than face her in a fair fight. "You love it," he said to her one night after Ruth had driven off into the dark and the kids were asleep. "The work. You come alive." Adeline looked up from the laptop surprised. She considered it. "I did love it. I loved building things, solving things. I loved being good at something." Her face clouded. "I told myself for 4 months that I never wanted to go back to that world, that it poisoned everything, and it did. But," she looked at the laptop, "God help me, Wyatt, I miss this. Not the money, not the jets, this, being sharp, being useful, fighting something and knowing I might win." "So go back to it," Wyatt said. "When you win, and you're gonna win, go back and run your company. It's yours. You built it. You should have it." Something flickered across her face. Is that what you think I should do? I think... Wyatt stopped. This was the conversation he'd been avoiding for 2 weeks, the one that lived under every other conversation. I think you're the best at what you do that I ever saw. And I think a woman like that belongs running an empire, not hiding on a broke farm at the end of a gravel road. He made himself say it. I think you should take back everything they stole and never look back. Adeline was quiet for a long moment. And that's what you want, she said. It wasn't quite a question. Wyatt didn't answer. He couldn't because the true answer was no, and he had no right to it. He had $11 and 2 kids and a farm he was only barely keeping. What could a man like him possibly offer a woman who was about to reclaim an $80 billion empire? It would be selfish cruel even to ask her to want anything less than what was hers. We should get some sleep, he said instead. Ruth's coming back tomorrow. He saw the disappointment cross Adeline's face before she smoothed it away. Right, she said. Sleep. Neither of them slept. The plan came together with a precision that would have frightened Wyatt if he hadn't watched Adeline build it. Boone made contact carefully through channels with a former federal prosecutor he trusted who agreed to review the evidence, and if it held up to walk it directly to the U.S. Attorney's office. Ruth finished the forensic package, and Adeline, working from the farm, drafted the other half of the plan, the public reckoning. Prosecution alone isn't enough, she explained to Wyatt and Boone on a call. Wheels of justice turn slow. If I only go to the FBI, the board has weeks, maybe months to spin the story to keep telling the world I'm unstable to poison the jury pool before there even is one. I need the truth to hit the public the same day the evidence hits the prosecutor. One reporter, national. Someone with a spine who can't be bought, who breaks the story so wide and so fast that by the time Meridian's PR machine wakes up, the whole country already knows Adeline Cross is alive and was framed. You have someone in mind, Boone said. I do. Her voice was grim. There's a business reporter at one of the big papers who tried to blow the whistle on us 3 years ago on a much smaller thing, and I'll be honest, I helped bury her story. It's one of the things I'm not proud of. She paused. She hates me. Which is exactly why she's the one. She'll never suspect I'm handing her a story that vindicates me. And when she checks the evidence and finds it's real, she'll run it without mercy, because that's what I taught her to expect from me. A bitter laugh. The one person in journalism who'd never take a kind word from me at face value is the one person who'll believe the documents. Wyatt shook his head slowly. You think like a chess player. I think like someone who spent 19 years surrounded by people trying to take what was mine, Adeline said, and I'm about to use every ugly thing I learned to take it back. They set the date. 11 days out. On that morning at exactly the same hour, Boone's prosecutor would walk the evidence into the U.S. Attorney's office. The reporter would receive a complete package with a locked embargo lifting at noon, and Adeline Cross would step in front of a camera with Gideon Boone at her side and end 4 months of silence. Everything at once. 100 fuses, 1 match. 11 days. Adeline said the night they finalized it. She was standing at the kitchen window again, the way she had that first night, staring out at the dark driveway. But she wasn't watching the road with fear anymore. She was watching it like a general studying a battlefield. 11 days and it's over. One way or another. It's gonna go our way, Wyatt said. You keep saying that. Because I keep believing it. He came to stand beside her. You've thought of everything. Boone's thought of everything. There's not a hole in it. There's always a hole, Adeline said quietly. That's the thing about war, Wyatt. You plan for everything you can imagine, and then it comes at you from the one direction you didn't. She wrapped her arms around herself. I keep thinking about the kids. 11 days is a long time. Anything can happen in 11 days. Nothing's gonna happen to the kids. I promised you. I know. She looked at him. It's the one thing I'm sure of. That you'd die before you let anything touch them. Her voice softened. I've never known anyone like that. Someone whose word just means what it says. In my world, a promise was a negotiating position. With you, it's... She shook her head. It's bedrock. They stood there and the window closed, and the wanting was there again, thick in the air between them. And this time, neither of them stepped back from it. "Adeline," Wyatt said, "don't." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Please don't. Because in 11 days I go back to a world you can't imagine, and you stay here with your farm and your kids, and if you say the thing you're about to say, I don't know how I walk out that door." "And I have to walk out that door, Wyatt. It's my company, my name, my life. I built it and they stole it, and I can't not go take it back, even for—" She stopped. "Even for this." "I wasn't going to ask you to stay," Wyatt said quietly. "I'd never ask you to be less than what you are. He struggled for the words. "I just wanted you to know that these 3 weeks, it wasn't nothing to me. When you're back in your world, running your empire, I wanted you to know that for a little while, on a broke farm at the end of a gravel road, you were—" His voice caught. "You were home to us. To all 3 of us. That's all. You don't have to say anything back." Adeline's eyes were bright. For a moment, she didn't speak. Then she reached up and put her hand against his face, and Wyatt covered it with his own, and they stood there like that, not kissing, just holding on 2 people at the edge of something neither of them could afford to name. "You were home to me too," she whispered. "That's what makes it so hard. In my whole life, Wyatt Coleman, this is the only place that ever felt like home." And then, because the timing of ruin is never merciful, headlights swept across the driveway. They both went rigid. "Ruth," Wyatt breathed. "Is that Ruth?" "Ruth comes after midnight," Adeline said, and her voice had gone flat and cold. "It's 9 o'clock. 2 vehicles." Wyatt saw them through the window. 2 dark SUVs coming up the gravel road, slow, deliberate, the way people drive when they're sure of where they're going, and in no hurry to be stopped. They rolled to a halt at the top of the driveway, blocking his truck, and the headlights cut off, and for a moment there was just darkness and the ticking of cooling engines. "Get the kids," Adeline said. Her voice didn't shake. It had gone somewhere past fear into something ice-cold and clear. "Wyatt, the kids, now. That's the rule. You get Sadie and Eli out the back and you take them to the storm cellar and you don't come out no matter what you hear. Go. I'm not leaving you to face. You promised me—" She grabbed his shirt, and now her eyes were wild. "You promised me the kids come first before me, before anything. You swore it, Wyatt. You said the word, so you go. Right now. Get them safe. That's how you help me. The only way. If they come in here and find those children, everything we built is a weapon in their hands. Get them out." Doors opened on the SUVs. Wyatt counted shapes in the dark. 4 men, maybe 5, moving with the unhurried confidence of people who did this for a living. Every instinct in his body screamed to stand and fight. 20 years of Navy training told him to plant his feet between the threat and the people he loved. But Adeline was right, and the deepest, oldest part of him, the father older than the sailor, knew it. The children came first. That was the one rule. That was bedrock. "The cellar has a bolt on the inside," he said, fast, already moving. "There's water, there's a phone charger, the walls are stone. Once I'm in with the kids—" He grabbed her by both arms. "You come too, the second you can. You hear me. You get to that cellar. Don't you dare play hero. Don't you dare decide you're not worth saving. You come to that cellar. Go, Wyatt. Say it. Say you'll come. I'll come. Now go." He ran down the hall into Sadie's room, and he scooped his sleeping daughter up, blanket and all. "Daddy, what?" "Shh, baby, we're playing the quiet game, the quietest game ever, not a sound." And then Eli from the crib. The crib Adeline had fixed, and Eli stirred, but didn't cry. God bless him, didn't cry. Wyatt held both his children against his chest and went out the back door into the dark, low and fast across the yard toward the old storm cellar his grandfather had dug into the hill a lifetime ago. Behind him in the lit kitchen window he saw Adeline turn to face the front door. She was not running. She was standing in the center of the room, spine straight, chin up, the way she'd stood on the porch in front of Diane Pryor, the way she'd stood in Gideon Boone's office, the CEO, the empire builder, the woman they'd been so afraid of they had to forge her madness. She reached up and very deliberately tucked her hair behind her ear. She was getting ready to be seen. Wyatt got the cellar door open, got the kids down the stone steps into the cool dark, and it took everything he had, everything not to turn around and go back. "Daddy, I'm scared," Sadie whispered, and Eli was awake now and starting to fuss, and Wyatt held them both and bolted the door from the inside and pressed his back against the stone. "I know, baby," he breathed. "I know. Daddy's got you. We're safe down here. The walls are stone. Nothing can get in. We just have to be quiet and brave, okay? Can you be brave for me? Can you help me keep Eli quiet?" "Where's Miss Adeline?" Wyatt closed his eyes. "She's coming," he said. "She's gonna come down here with us. We just have to wait." Up in the house, Adeline heard the boots on the porch. She heard the front door open without a knock. And she watched 4 men file into Wyatt Coleman's living room, and in the center of them, in a coat that cost more than the farm with silver at his temples, and a smile she'd once thought she loved, stood Damon Reeve. "Hello, Adeline," Damon said. "You've been very hard to find." Adeline did not move. "Damon, you look." He glanced around the shabby room, the peeling wallpaper, the water stains, the crib mattress against the wall, and his lip curled with a contempt so genuine it was almost funny. "You look terrible. Is this really where you've been here?" He laughed. "The great Adeline Cross hiding in a hovel with some dirt farmer god. It's almost sad." "How did you find me?" "A grocery charge. Formula of all things." Damon shook his head, mock sorrowful. "Sloppy. The Adeline I knew was never sloppy. You really have lost your edge." He nodded at the men around him. "But then that's the story, isn't it? Poor Adeline, unstable, erratic, not herself anymore. Everyone already believes it. You made it so easy. All you had to do was disappear, and you did for 4 whole months. Do you know how that looks? A CEO who vanishes right after being removed for mental instability." He spread his hands. "You've been writing our story for us this whole time. You're recording this," Adeline said. It wasn't a question. "You wouldn't come in person unless you needed a performance. So which is it, Damon? Are you here to threaten me on camera so you have footage of me being paranoid? Or are you here to make sure I have my accident somewhere far from any camera at all?" Damon's smile flickered, and in that flicker, Adeline saw everything. She saw that he'd come himself, because he no longer trusted anyone else to finish it. She saw that 4 months of not finding her had made the board desperate, made them turn on each other, made Damon the one holding the bag, the one who had to personally guarantee she'd never surface or lose everything. She saw a man who had run out of time exactly the way Wyatt had said their enemies would, exactly the way she'd planned to make them. She was 11 days early. The trap wasn't set. Boone didn't have the evidence with the prosecutor yet. The reporter didn't have the package. There was no camera on her side, no shield, no 100 fuses. There was just a woman in a farmhouse and 4 men, and the one person in the world who'd sworn to protect the children hiding in the dark. But Adeline Cross had built an empire out of nothing with $9,000 and nerve. And she had spent 19 years learning that the person who controls the story controls everything. "You should know," she said, and her voice was perfectly, terrifyingly calm, "that everything you did is already gone. The forged medical records, the wire transfers to the shell companies, the 18 months you spent selling my software to Kestrel Systems." She watched Damon's face change at the name. "Yes, I know about Kestrel. I've known for a long time. And it's not in my head, Damon, and it's not on some drive you can take from me tonight. It's already with people you can't reach. Federal people." She smiled, and it was the smile of a woman who had nothing left to lose and everything to protect. "You came here to make me disappear. But I already surfaced days ago to exactly the right people. You're not 11 days early, Damon. You're 4 months too late. The only question left is whether you want to add kidnapping and murder to the charges that are already coming in a farmhouse in front of witnesses with your face on every camera these men are wearing." She tilted her head. "Because that's the one thing that turns prison into something worse." It was a bluff. Most of it was a bluff. And Adeline Cross delivered it the way she'd delivered 1,000 negotiations, the way she'd talked a state caseworker off a porch, the way she'd built an empire with absolute unshakable conviction, betting everything on the oldest truth she knew. That a cornered man told he's already lost will hesitate. And Damon Reeve hesitated, out in the cold stone dark of the cellar, Wyatt Coleman held his children and pressed his ear to the bolted door and heard faint through the earth the sound of raised voices, and then cutting through the night the distant wail of sirens on the county road growing louder, because Ruth Delgado had come early. After all, had seen 2 SUVs blocking the driveway from the top of the road and had done the only thing that made sense. She'd called every deputy in the county. The sirens changed everything. Adeline saw it happen on Damon's face, saw the calculation shift, the confidence drain the moment. A man who'd come to make a problem disappear realized he was about to become one. He turned toward the window toward the growing wail on the county road, and the 4 men around him went tense and uncertain, looking to him for orders he suddenly didn't have. "You called them," Damon said. "I didn't touch a phone," Adeline said. And it was true, which made it more frightening to him than any lie could have. "I told you, Damon. You're not early. You're late. This was always going to happen. The only thing you got to decide was how many crimes you'd be standing in the middle of when it did." She took a step toward him, and there was nothing left of the woman on the porch in the rain. There was only the woman who'd built an empire, who'd stared down boards and rivals, and now stared down the man who'd tried to erase her. "Run. There's still a back road. You've got about 90 seconds before those deputies block the driveway. And I promise you, you do not want to be found standing in this house." For one heartbeat, Damon didn't move. And Adeline saw in his eyes the thing she'd been counting on all along, that Damon Reeve had never once in his life been willing to go down for anything. He'd sold her out to save himself. He'd forged her madness to save himself. And now, with sirens closing in, he would run to save himself, and in running he would confirm every single thing the evidence already said about him. "This isn't over," Damon said. "It's been over for months," Adeline said. "You just got here." He ran. He and his 4 men went out the front door and scattered toward the SUVs, and Adeline heard engines roar and gravel spray, and she walked calmly to the window and watched 2 sets of taillights tear down the gravel road straight into the wall of county cruisers coming the other way. She didn't watch the collision of it. She was already moving. She was out the back door and across the yard before the first deputy's door opened, running through the dark toward the hill, toward the old stone cellar, and she was pounding on the bolted door with both fists. "Wyatt! Wyatt, it's me. It's Adeline. It's over. Open the door." The bolt scraped back. The door swung up, and there in the dark on the stone steps was Wyatt Coleman, with an infant against one shoulder and a 6-year-old clamped to his side, and the look on his face when he saw her alive, whole standing in the moonlight, was a thing Adeline would remember for the rest of her life. "You came," he said. His voice broke on it. "You said you'd come." "I keep my promises too," Adeline said. "I learned it from somebody." And then Sadie tore loose from her father and flung herself up the steps and wrapped her arms around Adeline's legs, sobbing. "You didn't leave? You didn't leave? I thought you left." And Adeline dropped to her knees on the cold ground and gathered the little girl in, and held her so tight that neither of them could breathe. And over the child's head she looked at Wyatt, and Wyatt looked at her, and neither of them said the thing. They didn't need to. It was said in every line of both their faces. The deputies found them like that, a man and a woman, and 2 children kneeling in the dark outside a storm cellar, holding on to each other like the world had tried to end and hadn't quite managed it. What came after took months, but it never once felt uncertain, because Adeline Cross had built the trap too well for anything to go wrong once it was sprung. Damon Reeve and 2 of his men were arrested that night, run to ground at a county roadblock, with dashcam footage of them fleeing a farmhouse where a missing CEO had been reported, held against her will. Ruth Delgado's phone call, the one that saved them, turned out to be the least of what she'd done. She'd also, on Boone's standing instructions, uploaded the complete evidence package to the former federal prosecutor the moment she saw the SUVs 11 days ahead of schedule, because the plan had a failsafe built in for exactly this, and the failsafe held. By dawn, the U.S. Attorney's Office had the drive. By noon the next day, the reporter had the story, and Adeline had been right about her. The woman ran it without mercy, exactly as Adeline had known she would, because the documents were real, and the woman had spent 3 years hating Adeline Cross, and was constitutionally incapable of believing anything Adeline said until the evidence forced her to. The headline broke across the country like a dam giving way. The founder of Meridian Global, presumed unstable and vanished, was alive and had been framed, and here was the proof: transfer by transfer, forgery by forgery. The board turned on itself within a week. That was the thing about a conspiracy: it only held as long as everyone believed they'd get away with it. And the moment the evidence went public, every one of them scrambled to be the first to cooperate, to trade testimony for leniency, to blame Damon and each other. Adeline watched it from Wyatt's kitchen table on Ruth's borrowed laptop, and she didn't gloat. She just watched the empire that had cast her out devour itself, and when it was done, there was a hole at the center of it, exactly her shape. "They want you back," Boone told her 3 weeks after the arrests, sitting at that same kitchen table with a stack of papers and his reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. "The interim board, the major shareholders, what's left of them anyway? They're prepared to reinstate you as CEO effective immediately, with a full public apology and a settlement I'd frankly be embarrassed to read out loud in front of children." He glanced at Sadie, coloring at the other end of the table. "It's the largest number I've ever seen with a person's name attached to it, Ms. Cross. You won, completely. You get it all back." "You." The kitchen went quiet. Adeline looked at the papers. She looked at Sadie, tongue poking out in concentration, over a drawing of what appeared to be the whole family, including a lopsided Adeline with yellow hair. She looked at Eli, asleep in the bouncer fat and content. And she looked at Wyatt standing at the counter, with a dish towel over his shoulder, very carefully not looking at her, his jaw tight. A man bracing for a blow he'd told himself was coming since the day she arrived. "I get it all back," Adeline repeated. "Every last penny, and the corner office." Boone slid the papers toward her. "You built that company from nothing, Ms. Cross. You're the best there ever was at what you do. I've watched you these last 2 months, and I've never seen anyone like you." He paused. "It's yours. It was always yours. All you have to do is sign and get on a plane and go take it." Adeline picked up the pen. Wyatt turned away toward the sink so she wouldn't see his face. He'd known. He'd known all along. He'd told her himself that a woman like her belonged running an empire, not hiding on a broke farm. And he'd meant it, and he'd been right. And now the moment was here, and it hurt so much worse than he'd let himself imagine. He picked up a dish that was already clean and started washing it just to have somewhere to put his hands. "Gideon," Adeline said, "I want to ask you something, as my lawyer." "Of course. If I sign this and take the settlement and reinstate myself as CEO, do I have to be in the corner office, physically, to run it?" Boone frowned. "I well know. Legally no. Plenty of executives run companies remotely, or from satellite offices, or—" He stopped. "Ms. Cross, what are you asking?" "I'm asking," Adeline said slowly, and Wyatt's hands went still in the water, "whether I can own the company and control the company and make sure every single person who tried to destroy me stays destroyed and never once set foot in that building again, unless I choose to." She set the pen down. "Because I spent 19 years in that corner office, Gideon, and it was the loneliest place I've ever been. And I spent 2 months in this kitchen, and it's the only place I've ever been happy." She looked at Wyatt's back. "And I'm 46 years old, and I finally understand the difference between the thing you built your life around and the thing that's actually your life." Wyatt turned around. "Adeline," he said, "what are you— You can't give up your company for—" "I'm not giving up my company," Adeline said. "Weren't you listening? I'm keeping every share of it. I'm taking the settlement and the control and the vindication. I'll run the whole thing from a laptop and a phone and a jet when I absolutely have to, and I'll bury anyone who ever comes for me again." She stood up from the table. "I'm not giving up a single thing that's mine, Wyatt Coleman. I'm just refusing to give up something else that's mine too." She crossed the kitchen and stood in front of him. "You told me once you'd never ask me to be less than what I am, and you never did, not once. But you never asked me to stay either. You just opened the door and waited. So I'm going to make this easy on both of us." She took a breath. "I'm not walking out that door. I'm walking through it and staying on this side of it, if you'll have me." Wyatt stared at her. The dish towel dropped off his shoulder onto the floor, and neither of them noticed. "You're a billionaire," he said hoarsely. "I've got Adeline. I've got a farm and 2 kids, and I can't. There's nothing I can give you. Nothing. You have everything. What could a man like me possibly— Everything I never had, Adeline said. That's what you can give me. That's what you've been giving me for 2 months. Her voice broke. A place where nobody's calculating what I'm worth to them. A little girl who calls me her second best friend. A baby who knows my voice. A man who ran into a storm cellar to protect my children like they were his own, and then swore at me until I promised to come out alive. She put her hands on his chest. I have $80 billion, Wyatt, and it never once bought me a single thing that was real. And then I knelt down in your mud in the rain and told you I wasn't fit for any man, and you— Her voice failed. You spent 2 months proving me wrong. Every single day. You never let me believe it for 1 hour. You're not fit for any man, Wyatt said, and there were tears on his face now, and he didn't care. That's what you told me. First thing out of your mouth. I know. You were dead wrong. I know that too. She laughed, wet and broken. You told me you'd keep bringing it up every time I proved it. Well, here I am. Prove me wrong one more time, sailor. Tell me you'll have me. And from the other end of the table, in the blunt way only a 6-year-old can manage, Sadie looked up from her drawing and said, Daddy, just say yes. She's already family. I made her in the picture. Wyatt Coleman looked down at his daughter's drawing. 4 figures holding hands under a lopsided sun, a house, a barn, a scribble that might have been a chicken, and something in his chest that had been broken for a year, that had been broken since a hospital hallway, and a newborn son and a wife who held her baby for an hour and then was gone, finally quietly knit itself back together. Yes, he said. God, yes. Of course, yes. And then Adeline Cross, who had built an empire and lost it and taken it back, put her arms around a broke Navy veteran in a farmhouse kitchen and kissed him, while a 6-year-old cheered and a baby woke up and started to fuss, and Gideon Boone quietly gathered his papers and let himself out to give them the room, chuckling all the way to his car about the strangest best case of his 31-year career. They were married in the spring in the garden. Adeline never used the deposit on, not the one she'd planned with Damon, that one she let rot, but a new one planted right there on the farm in the field, where the corn had died the year everything nearly fell apart. Sadie was the flower girl. Eli, just walking now, toddled down the aisle in a tiny suit and immediately sat down in the grass and refused to move, which everyone agreed was the best part of the whole ceremony. Ruth Delgado came. Gideon Boone gave a toast that started as a legal summary and turned halfway through into something that made the whole party cry. Diane Pryor, the caseworker, came too. Adeline had invited her on principle, and she stood at the back and watched a family she'd once been sent to break apart stand up in a field and become permanent, and she cried harder than anyone. The money changed things, of course. It would have been a lie to say it didn't. The farm got its wire and its new fences and a barn that didn't sag. Wyatt fought her on it for exactly 1 week before he understood that letting her fix the things she loved was its own kind of gift, the same way she'd let him carry things she was too proud to hand anyone else. She ran Meridian Global from a converted room over the garage on a schedule that put the school pickup ahead of the shareholder call. And she was, if anything, more feared than she'd ever been, because a woman who has already survived being erased is not afraid of anyone in a boardroom. Damon Reeve went to federal prison. So did 4 members of the board. The competitor that had bought her stolen software paid a settlement that Adeline characteristically used to build something a foundation in a field where corn used to die for widowed veterans raising children alone, because she had learned exactly what that costs and exactly how few people ever help. But the money was never the point, and both of them knew it, and that was the whole miracle of it. The point was this. Years later, on a summer evening, the farm was alive again. Really alive cattle in the north pasture, where the fences used to sag a garden. Adeline tended herself because she'd discovered she loved growing things. She could touch a house full of light where a house had once been full of foreclosure notices. Sadie was 11 now, tall and fierce and unafraid. The kind of girl who told the truth even when it was hard. Because her father had taught her that truth was the only thing they couldn't take from you. And her mother, she called Adeline that, now had for years, and it never once stopped meaning everything to both of them. Her mother had taught her that a woman could be gentle and dangerous at the same time. Eli was 6 dinosaur obsessed forever, demanding pancakes shaped like a stegosaurus, and he had no memory at all of a time before Adeline, which was its own kind of grace. On that summer evening, Wyatt Coleman stood on the porch rebuilt now solid under his boots and watched his wife chase their children through the long grass in the gold light, all three of them laughing. And he thought about a night years ago when headlights had cut through the dark and a woman in a ruined coat had knelt in his mud and said she needed a place to disappear. She hadn't disappeared. Neither of them had. Instead, two people who'd been vanishing for years, him into grief and debt and exhaustion. Her into fear and betrayal and the loneliness of a corner office, had somehow impossibly found each other at the end of a gravel road and refused to let each other go. Adeline caught him watching. She left the kids to their game and came up the porch steps and leaned against him the way she'd been leaning against him for years now. And they stood together and watched Sadie and Eli tumble in the grass. "You're doing the thing," she said. "What thing?" "The thing where you look at us like you can't believe it's real. You still do it, after all this time." "Because I still can't believe it's real," Wyatt said. "Some mornings I wake up and I'm sure I dreamed you. And then I smell coffee." He put his arm around her. "The good coffee. The kind that doesn't come from a can." Adeline laughed. "I still buy it at that same little store. The man there finally stopped being confused about me." Took him years. It took him years. She was quiet a moment watching the children. "You know what I think about sometimes that night? The porch, the rain. I was so sure I was at the end of everything. I'd lost the company, lost Damon, lost my whole life, and I drove 11 hours to nowhere and knelt down in the mud in front of a stranger and told him I wasn't fit for any man." She turned her face up to him. "And I meant it, Wyatt. I believed it all the way down. I thought I was broken past fixing." "You weren't broken," Wyatt said. "You just got robbed. There's a difference. I told you that the first week." "You did." She smiled. "You told me a man who gets robbed didn't fail, he got robbed. And I didn't believe you. Not for a long time." She looked back out at the field, at the daughter and the son who'd made her their mother, at the life that had grown up out of a failing farm and a fugitive's fear. "But you kept saying it, and you kept proving it, until one day I woke up, and I wasn't the woman they threw out of that conference room anymore, and I wasn't even the woman who took it all back." Her voice softened. "I was just home. I was just yours. And that turned out to be the only thing I'd ever really wanted under all the rest of it." Wyatt pulled her close. Down in the grass, Eli tackled his sister, and both of them shrieked with laughter, and the sound carried up across the field and over the porch and out into the gold evening. And it was the sound of a house that had once been a place where things came to die, and had become instead a place where things began. "People ask me sometimes," Adeline said, "how a billionaire ended up on a farm, and I never know how to explain it. That you didn't save me. That's what everyone assumes, the rich woman in trouble, the good man who rescued her. But that's not what happened." "No," Wyatt agreed. "It's not. You didn't save me. And I didn't save you." She looked up at him, and her eyes were wet and steady and completely certain. "We were both already too far gone for saving. You couldn't have saved me. I couldn't have saved you." She put her hand over his heart. "But we rebuilt each other, piece by piece, day by day. Two broken people who found out the only way back was together." Wyatt Coleman looked at his wife and his children and the farm that lived again around them, and he understood that everything he'd nearly lost had come back to him 100-fold. Not because anyone rescued anyone, but because two people who had every reason to quit on the world had chosen instead to build a new one. Sometimes love doesn't arrive gently. Sometimes it comes in a ruined coat at 3 a.m, kneels down in the mud, and tells you it isn't fit for anyone at all. And sometimes, if you're brave enough to open the door anyway, it turns out to be the truest thing you'll ever hold. They didn't save each other. They rebuilt each other, and the home they made out of the wreckage stood unshakable for the rest of their lives.